Well, joining me now to discuss what China is likely to do in Afghanistan is Ahmed Rashid, a journalist who has written many books about the Taliban and terrorism. Ahmed, it's good to have you on the program. I want to get your sense of how China sees this moment and whether it sees it as an opportunity.
Absolutely. I think the overall winner of this whole conflict has been China. China wants to exploit the minerals in Afghanistan, the oil, the gas, and it wants peace and stability to do that. We've already seen China's playing a major role in salvaging Pakistan, which faces near bankruptcy. China has helped out with projects and with money for those projects. The problem with Afghanistan is China does not give aid as such. And the demand right now is humanitarian aid. And that's what the West is gearing up to give Afghanistan if they can find a compromise with the Taliban government. But China does not give that kind of aid. So we have to see if the Chinese are going to change their tactics in order to help the Afghans, because the Afghans are desperate for aid.
One of the real critical questions here, and I think it's facing the rest of the world, but particularly China, is just how close it gets to the Taliban. Are we likely to see recognition of the Taliban as a legitimate government in Afghanistan? You've already mentioned the economic opportunities. Just how close politically does China get to the Taliban?
China has been meeting with the Taliban for the last 3 or 4 years. And at one point in the beginning, it did play a conciliatory role in trying to bring the Taliban together with the government. But that didn't work out. China stepped back for a time. And now it seems everything is playing into China's hand without China having to do very much. And that is going to obviously cause resentment with the United States and with other Western countries. I think the main thing about China is that it wants peace and stability, and it wants to explore all options in Afghanistan, especially the mineral wealth.
One of the really critical things that everyone's watching right now is the response of all the neighbouring countries. And there's some fascinating geopolitical games being played. You mentioned Pakistan. China and Pakistan are very close and share an interest, don't they, in limiting India's potential to get a foothold in Afghanistan as well. Talk us through that power play.
Well, one reason Pakistan has backed the Taliban for the last 20 years is because of what it fears is an Indian threat and the idea that India could become influential in Afghanistan and replace Pakistan. And that's the last thing that the Pakistanis want. China supports this position. I think what we'll see very quickly is a Chinese recognition of the Taliban government. That probably will be followed by 3 or 4 countries, Pakistan, Iran, Russia, China, will probably be the first to recognize the Taliban government, even before the West. These countries don't have any qualms about human rights, women's rights, education, or any of the social aspects. They find it much easier to recognize the Taliban and win brownie points with the Taliban rather than wait.
I want to get your thoughts as well on how this factors into the big power rivalry, China versus the United States, whether China sees the pullout of Afghanistan by the US as a sign of US weakness and questions American resolve, and also whether the opportunity in Afghanistan now also creates a bigger footprint for China, not just there, but in other parts of the region throughout Central Asia, and how that fits with the Belt and Road Initiative.
China is already deeply embedded in Pakistan and in Central Asia. They're building power plants and roads and railways, and this belt initiative is really taking off. Part of the puzzle is Afghanistan, and obviously the Chinese want Afghanistan to join this process because Afghanistan is landlocked, but it's crucial to the routes and to the roads that the Chinese want to build. So I see China as quickly recognizing the Taliban, even while the West fumbles about whether it should give aid or not aid to this government. And the Chinese being extremely grateful, and they've already said that they're not going to mention the Uyghur problem. That the Uyghurs are nothing to do with the Taliban, and we will stay silent on that. But this was a public declaration made by the Taliban about 3 weeks ago, before they took Kabul, when they met with the Chinese foreign minister. And that's come as quite a shock to many Muslims, because Uyghurs, of course, are Muslims, and countries want solidarity with the Uyghurs. And clearly that's not going to be the case as far as the Taliban are concerned.
The Taliban is one question, but of course there are other militant groups operating in the region, Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Khorasan. I'm wondering, given that you've raised the question of the Uyghurs, whether that becomes a problem for China, whether Uyghurs look for support amongst others militant groups, or those other militant groups look at creating some opportunities now in China because of the crackdown on the Uyghurs by the Chinese.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, China is very wary of all these groups. They've suffered. There was an attack by the Pakistani Taliban that killed 9 Chinese just a couple of weeks ago. The Chinese engineers were killed. So China is trying to be extra cautious, and then China is not going to jump in immediately. They're going to wait until they see some kind of stability. They are not risk takers in any big way. They're going to wait until they see the situation evolve. But they will be one of the first to recognize the Taliban.
Can I ask you now more broadly about the Taliban, Ahmed, and this discussion right now, or speculation about whether the Taliban has changed, or whether we're talking about a Taliban 2.0. Do you see this as another iteration of the Taliban, or is it the Taliban that we knew in the 1990s?
Look, I always say that ideologically it has not changed. The Taliban's interpretation of the Sharia, Islamic law, has not changed. It's a very harsh, unforgiving interpretation, which is not accepted by other Afghans or by other Muslims even. And so the Taliban's interpretation of Islam and their unwillingness to compromise is going to be with us. And so, I see continued unrest for a very long time in Afghanistan. There's the woman issue, the education issue. What are they going to do with these things? They don't seem to have a plan worked out. They don't seem to have a acceptance by the majority of the Afghan population. And I think we are going to see protests and resistance right through this period. It's going to be very unsettling.
Are you talking about the sort of resistance that we'd seen in Afghanistan before? Are you talking about an armed resistance to the Taliban? We know that in the north, it's traditionally been an area of resistance to the Taliban. So the Taliban may be in control, but this doesn't mean, in your view, that the fighting ends?
No, I don't think the fighting is over. Yes, there can be uprisings like the one we've just seen in Panjshir, which seems to have been defeated. I think that uprising was premature. I can imagine the Afghan warlords and a lot of the anti-Taliban elements coming together, first of all, clandestinely, and putting together an alliance so that they could take on the Taliban. Taliban are now incredibly powerful because of the extent of the American weaponry that they have captured, the extraordinary amount of weaponry, thousands of vehicles and guns and mortars and artillery and helicopters, everything under the sun. And this was an unexpected bonus for their conquest of Kabul.
I want to get your thoughts on what this rivalry with other militant groups means in the region, particularly Islamic State Khorasan, because it is such a complex picture, isn't it? We know that it is made up of former members of the Taliban. There are close links between Islamic State Khorasan and the Haqqani network on the Afghan-Pakistan border. Yes, they may be rivals, but they also potentially cooperate or share a particular outlook?
Well, I think certainly they shared the outlook of getting rid of the Americans and driving them out of Afghanistan. But the IS is actually challenging the Taliban for leadership of the fundamentalist movement in Afghanistan. And that's something the Taliban are not going to tolerate. I can see the Taliban not accepting IS and trying to wipe them out in the weeks and months ahead. But I can see them accepting and living with other groups such as Al-Qaeda and the Pakistani groups that they have sheltered for so many years, the Uyghur groups, even though they may commit to the Chinese, there are still Uyghur groups in Afghanistan. And I see the Taliban basically playing a double game here, going along with some fundamentalist groups which are critical to their own infrastructure and their own development, but making sure that IS does not gain a foothold in the leadership ranks of the militants in Afghanistan.
Just finally, Ahmed, it's a bit of a cliche, I know, but it's long been said that Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. And I want to reflect on this moment and the American pullout and what you believe it means for the future of American power.
Well, I think it's been a huge blow to the image of America in the region. And I think it's going to spur on America's departure from South Asia and Central Asia. And the Americans are going to focus much more on the rivalry with China and East Asia. We're going to see a vacuum here. And this vacuum is likely to be filled by China in the sense of economics and politics and everything else. The Chinese have a huge advantage now, and it's been humiliating for the Americans to be defeated by a sort of ragtag army like the Taliban, and to be defeated twice in this region by the Afghans. And the Afghan militants are very proud of that.
Ahmed Rashid, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you again for giving us your time.
Thank you very much.